Hi, everybody. It's KJ Jensen with the Western Patriot. I'm with Pastor Art Pawlowski, and we're here to talk about his experiences with his trial, imprisonment, and how he's a freedom fighter in Canada, among many. So, Arthur, what with the latest on the weekend on Sunday, why do you think they didn't let you do the March for Jesus? Do you think it was payback for what you've been for your outspokenness?
100%. Everything right now regarding me, my family, my brother David and his wife, my children, my son, that had, as you know, huge difficulties because, we're very recognizable. We have the same last name and people remember. And if they don't like what you do, what you represent, and then there comes a pure vengeance. So I truly believe 100% that what is happening to me personally and my family is a vengeance coming from all kinds of levels, not just the political arena. This is not just Jason Kenney. I believe that Naheed Nenshi is behind this as well. That's the Muslim mayor that we all know was an open homosexual in Toronto when he came to Alberta, and he decided to run for political party as a Muslim, while he then decided that he is, he's straight but not narrow. Okay. So anyway, we see this flip-flopping all the time. And as you know, Jason Kenney with his ministers, Trevor Taves and a Minister of Environment, Jason Nixon, and then the minister at that time, Taylor Chandra, which he was a minister of health at that time. They partied, a whiskey party, no social distancing, no 6 feet apart, no wearing a pampers on their faces, like kumbaya, life is good. I am in power. I'm a pharaoh. And why would you dare to compare me to slaves? Because that's exactly how they treat us, slaves. And the opponents, if you remember, Jason Kenney, this traitor that should be charged for treason in the province of Alberta, he calls us, you, anyone that is watching this that disagrees with him, he called you bags. He called you bags, just like Adolf Hitler called people worms. Now Jason Kenney, a few years later, he calls his opponents, political opponents, people that disagree with him, bugs. So what I'm trying to say is nothing is new under the sun. This is just a repetition of history. What happened yesterday, it's happening today. Unfortunately, people are not learning from history because our educational system is not educating, it's indoctrinating. They're more interested in fluidity of who you think you are. And if you are a pen right now, well, that's okay. If you feel like a pen, then I guess maybe you are a pen. You have been born a pen. Therefore, well, we got to call you pen. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but that's the nonsense they are teaching our children. And of course, I got 3 children, all of them in school still. And the only thing they come and tell me what the mainstream educational system is pushing is, if you're white, hate yourself because you're responsible for every cataclysm that this earth has ever had. And if you're a Christian and a white man, then that's it. You're at the lowest place in the barrel. So that's exactly what is happening. My son just finished university. He says he barely endured this indoctrination. He said that every single day they are telling us to hate ourselves because of our race. And of course, it's a nonsense because there's only one race, as you know, that's human race. And we have all different shades because of different climates. But there's only one human race, that's you and me. And in my church, I have black people, I have Asian people, I got native people, I have white. I don't care. You're welcome to come. You're a human being. God created you for a purpose. So anyway, it is a vengeance. It doesn't make any sense. Our lawyers are shaking their heads. They said, we've never seen something like this before. And of course, if you go back to the treatment I received in prison, that's unheard of. When I was there, I spent time with hardcore criminals, gangsters, murderers, men for, gun for hire, bank robbers, people that were selling, buying, distributing, drugs, people that committed some serious crimes. And they all, that's why I was so popular in prison, because they all saw what I was telling Canadians for a very long time. This has nothing to do with justice. This is nothing to do with keeping people healthy and safe. This is vengeance, and putting me in iron cages or in solitary confinement, or dragging me from my solitary confinement to another solitary confinement, but without water, without toilet, on concrete. That just tells you what the whole agenda was all about. And when they kidnapped me from Calgary by a lie, I don't know if you remember the story. A guard comes when I had a conversation with another inmate, and he says, Pawlowski, you have a visitor. And that was a very, very fishy situation. I knew there is something just not right. And when he took me to the admission or to visiting place, there were already sheriffs waiting for me. They shackled my feet and handcuffed me and kidnapped me without the knowledge of my lawyers or my family, my wife, to Edmonton, when I was placed on max pod for the most dangerous murderers, the most dangerous inmates. And then the next day, they took me and they placed me in a psych ward, which, of course, that was totally illegal, because you cannot just put someone in a psych ward without the evaluation of the doctors and AHS. And how do I know that? Because a doctor visited me during that time and said, Mr. Pawlowski, what are you doing here? And I said, well, I don't know. They took me from my cell, and here I am. And he says, well, they are not allowed to do stuff like this. They cannot go on top of our, AHS orders. And yet I spent almost a week there in a cell with a murderer that murdered his brother with a machete. I think what they wanted to achieve, and I'm not saying this lightly, I have 5 testimonies of 5 different individuals in the remand centers where they came to me testifying that the guards were inciting them to murder me, to beat me up, and they were offered all kinds of incentives to do that harm. They opened the cell one day, they opened the doors, expecting, I don't know, that others will just jump and do me harm. So I was subjected to that cruelty for 50 days. And then during that time, crown, I call them now crown persecutors, because they're no longer representing justice system. There's no justice in the system anymore. And he offered me a deal, and listen to this deal. He says, if you plead guilty to one little charge, all the other ones will go away. So the whole purpose of the remand center is to create a situation when people will break. Every single day they offered us fentanyl, they offered us cocaine. I've seen people dealing drugs. Of course, the drugs are coming from the guards and the nurses. And I'm not kidding you. I have been sharing this story for the past few months, and no one dared to threaten me even with this. So that tells you everything. They know what they're doing. They're the biggest drug traffickers that there are in a prison system. Every single day I was offered drugs, heavy drugs, like I said, fentanyl, cocaine. I saw people snorting. I saw people dealing, buying, selling, and all of that supplied by you. I mean, you are paying for the drugs being given to the inmates. So there is the whole system is not about rehabilitation. The whole system is a revolving door. What they're creating is clients that will come back to the system. Why? Because people do not know the remand centers are privately owned. The more heads, the more cattle, the more money that they are generating. It's a fascinating system, I have to admit, because it's like a river of dough, never stops. Always got clients, and you got to make sure, you have to make sure that those clients will come back to you eventually.
Just like
And
McDonald's.
it's very sad what I have
Yes.
experienced. I'll tell you truly, I think they made a big mistake putting me there, because so far I was arrested before this one. That was my 16th arrest, over 100 court cases, and so far 340 citations. But up to this last one, I was arrested 15 times, and they only kept me the longest was 3 days, 2 nights in the police detention center or in a police jail. Mm-hmm. I've never been in remand. It was just few hours when I was transferred, but I was never processed, never taken to the unit. So I think that's the mistake they've made, because they made me taste what's really and see what's really going on in the system. And I'm telling you, the whole system is rotten.
Yep. That's just like the government, just like everything else. Do you think that their concentrated efforts, it seems like, against Christians lately? In your
100%. How do I know that? And again, I say to the people, don't believe Arthur Pawlowski. This is not gospel according to Pawlowski. This is not my hearsay. Look at the statistics. Look at the data. 2.5 years we have been subjected to whatever you can add, whatever the name you want to add. I call it socialism, communism, fascism, hybrid, because it has a combination of a little bit of everything.
Yeah, they're experimenting.
Right. So they are using, and how do I know that? I was warning Canadians about this when the police force changed their uniforms from blue to almost black. Yeah. And I said, I said that when they did that and they changed from the white and blue their cruisers into black, intimidating. Yeah. I said, look, I said everywhere, look what's happening. They are using identical tactics to the Nazi empire. Why? Because the whole system, it can only survive, totalitarian dictatorship can only survive police state by terror, by fear. You have to scare the people. They have to fear you. There is no respect anymore towards men in uniform. They're gangsters in uniform. They are just muscle for politicians. They do not serve and protect anymore. They are muscle enforcers, gangsters, soldiers of Al Capone or Escobar or El Chapo. You can add whatever name.
Bodyguard.
Right? So, yes, when you observe what was happening in the past 2.5 years, you see politicians telling you one thing and doing totally opposite. So I remember they told us they're canceling Christmas. If we are going to catch you with your mother for a coffee during Christmas, then we're going to arrest you. We're going to monitor your driveways. We're going to ticket you. And the scaring thing. And I remember I invited people to the biggest Christmas party in Canada, and I had lots of people showing up, but also over 100 police officers, 52 police cars, chief of police, anti-terrorists. All of them came to a church service to intimidate, because they were not there to keep the peace. They were not needed there to keep the peace, because there is always peace when Christians show up. The moment they show up, peace is gone. Mm-hmm. They're no longer peace keepers. They are terror. They are terror makers. So one another proof, if you don't believe me, that this is a targeted attack strictly against Christians. During that time, there is not one recorded imam that was arrested or even ticketed during that time. There is not one Muslim that was arrested during that time. And again, some people may say, oh, because they were abiding citizens, they captured. No. How do I know that? Because when I spent with my brother David for inciting people to come to church, officiating a church service, and participating in illegal gathering, which all of that is, I'm a pastor. I kept the church open for hurting, suicidal, depressed, and hungry people. That's my job. That's the definition of my job, is to be in a church and keep the church open. I mean, during the plagues, historically speaking, for thousands of years, leprosy, black plague, Christians, pastors, priests, and people that loved other humans were assisting those that were dying, and they were taking care of those that no one else wanted to touch, because you could die, of leprosy, you could die because of black plague. But that's exactly what we are commanded to do, to bring mercy where no one else wants to extend their hands, to feed the poor, take care of the orphans and the widows. So when I was arrested, as you remember, in the middle of the highway with my brother David, I decided that day that if they are playing the game of Nazis, they will have to arrest me every single time on my knees and with my hands behind the back. You want to play a game, Nazi?
Peaceful resistance. Yeah, that's exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Then you will have to carry me and then go all the way, or shoot me dead in the middle of the highway. I mean, you're no different than the Nazis, the Gestapo of old, which, by the way, Gestapo means political police during the Adolf Hitler era. So I call them Gestapo because they are a corrupted police officers that are not following the Criminal Code of Canada, and Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and international human rights. All of them are kicked from our nation as we speak. And as you remember, I have been saying quite often that it's against the law. What they were doing is against the law. It's Section 176, 1, 2, and 3. Criminal Code of Canada prohibits you to interfere with the clergyman while he is in the middle of going or doing or coming from officiating or doing his duty in the capacity of a clergyman. And I did that, and they did not care. I got arrested, and I was charged, and I was found guilty based on a court order that was never given to me. I never received that order, and yet I was arrested, charged, and found guilty of breaking court order that was never given to me, or even it didn't have my name or my brother's name on it. So 3 days, 2 nights we were in prison, and then 2 days later, I received a phone call from a friend of mine. He was alderman in another city, and says, Art, you got to come and have a look what's happening here in the mosque. So I grabbed my wife and my cameras, and we went to see what's going on. And behold, I was just dragged from in the middle of the street, a highway, and facing years of imprisonment. I think that was up to 4 years prison for just being a pastor and doing what pastor's job is. And here I found myself in a mosque with thousands of Muslims. A majority of them did not wear a mask. Some did. Some did. No one kept their distance. There was no 6 feet apart. The imam was singing. As you remember, at that time, singing was prohibited by the law. No police, no AHS, no bylaws, no tickets, no arrests. And I recorded that. I recorded the videos. I posted them. And the mainstream propaganda machine kept their mouth shut. You can still watch the videos. They're on my YouTube channel, Pawlowski TV. And I found that fascinating, that one law for me, a totally different law for me. And of course, I already made a references to Jason Kenney and his, club of the elite. They broke the same rules, mandates, and regulations. Of course, they put them on the rest of us, and no tickets, no arrests, nothing, just completely nothing. And then fast forward, I embarrassed them on a global scale. I spent 4 months in the States. I was warning Americans that Canada is no longer a democratic country. We're living behind the Iron Curtain in China, which is a communist state. And we have Chinese soldiers being trained here on their soil, on our soil. And I said to Americans, be careful, because there is an enemy right across the border right now, and that enemy is growing strong, and one day it's going to attack you from the place that you thought you have the greatest ally, but you will have your greatest enemy. Anyway, they didn't like that. Of course, I met with the politicians. I met with the Congress people, U.S. senators, state senators. I met the governor. So I was on a big news outlets, and I shared my story, and Americans are getting it a lot faster than Canadians.
They have more of a revolution. They have more revolution in their history for sure. Like right off the bat.
Then I came back to Alberta, got arrested again, charged criminally for bogus charges for inciting people to come to church and not wearing a muzzle, even though they know I have a medical exemption. Anyway, fast forward, I got arrested again and again, and then I was asked to come to Montana and Alberta border to support the truck convoy.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, I think in prison they wanted to break me. They wanted to say I'm sorry. I'm telling you, and I said this hundreds of times, and I'm going to say it thousands of times, this was one of the most beautiful things I've ever participated in. Why? What did I see? I was invited as a pastor. Widely right now I am known as Canada's pastor or freedom pastor or whatever. They give me those different titles. Why? Because I love freedom. Jesus was the biggest freedom fighter ever lived on earth. He fought for our freedom. He fought for our lives. So no, naturally, I want people to be free. I am against slavery. I am against manipulation. I am against using tactics of fear or threats or coercion. You come to our church because you want to. No one is holding you. You can walk in and out. You can stand in the lineups, which we have. We feed thousands of people still, despite the threats and $100,000 ticket that I received for feeding the homeless people, which is still in trial. I just spent 3 days, and they want 3 additional days for that horrible crime.
Drag it out, right? Drag it out like they always do.
Yeah. So I went to Coutts. I ended up in Milk River. I did few church services before. So I did one when they came to Calgary on the way to Ottawa. Then I did another one the next day. They asked me to pray, to feed them. We brought gifts and water and juice and all kinds of goodies. We sent them, blessed, and we fed hundreds of people when they stopped here in Calgary. Off they went to Ottawa. I was asked to come. However, I decided to stay here because, not everyone can go, and someone should hold the fort here. So I decided to hold the fort here and then help the Milk River and the Coutts border. So I went over there. I conducted my church service, Lord's Supper. We had singing, worship. I gave a speech. Our CMP opened the blockade, and our CMP led me to Coutts. For those people that don't know the story, I did not have to break or go around or use, any tactics. The RCMP monitored me, recorded me, and then they opened the barricade, and they all, legally, whatever you want to call it, led me to Coutts, which I did the same thing. I did the Lord's Supper with the people, prayer, worship, and I gave my speech. During that speech, and by the way, when I went there, the roads were open. When I left Coutts, the roads were still open. And during my speech 3 times, I reminded people this fight is a peaceful fight. No guns, no swords. This is not a violent movement. So I wanted to bring to their attention how the Polish people fought communism behind the Iron Curtain under a movement that was called Solidarity Movement. And I remember that because I was there. I grew up under the Soviets' boots, and then I saw the Solidarity coming to power. And I said they did it by paralyzing their system, but no violent way. In other words, they refused to work for the tyrants. Polish people said to the communists, we shall not work for you anymore. You don't treat us as humans. You don't value us as humans. You are the pharaohs, we're the slaves. And today we're telling you we are no longer your slaves. And it was a very peaceful. Yes, the villains were violent. Tens of thousands were arrested. Some were shot dead. Tanks, machine guns, military, martial law. But the Polish people remained peaceful. And then within the first year, it grew to 1 million members. The government got scared, just like the Kenny's government got scared, and just like the Trudeau's totalitarian regime got scared, what was happening. The momentum was there. So they outlawed. I mean, you can make this stuff up. They're flipping the pages right now of history, and they're just doing the same thing that the other villains, other tyrants did before. So when the communist government outlawed Solidarity, it grew to 3 million members. And then just a few years later, it grew to 10 million members. And in 1989, the Iron Curtain got broken, the Berlin Wall got destroyed, and Poland had its first election since Nazis attacked our nation in 1939. So Poland remains to this day a democracy because there were millions of Polish people that were willing to stand up and pay the price. And not just Poland got its freedom. If you know your story, your history, you know that the whole Europe got free. Ukraine got its freedom, and Belarus, and I mean later on people like dictators like Zelensky and Putin, and those types of individuals took over their countries. Because don't kid yourself, I don't know how much you know about Ukraine. There was no democracy in Ukraine. Ukraine is the biggest traffic on earth right now. Russian soldiers just, I think 2 weeks ago, rescued 36,000 children from the bunkers that were subjected to biological biological experiments. So this is all smoke screen, mirrors. Don't believe the mainstream propaganda. I did business in Ukraine. Ukrainian people are beautiful. Russian people are amazing. They're good people, but the politicians are psychopaths. And just like we see, our politicians here, they are no longer serving people. They're no longer servants. They're psychopaths.
For sure. What do you think is a bigger enemy in Canada? Do you think it's cynicism or apathy?
Greed. I think it's greed. I'll tell you why. Canadian society, let's put it not just Canadian, Western society. So you've got the same problem in Europe. And I traveled all over the world. I've been in France. I've been in England. I've been in Holland. I traveled around. The problem with a Western civilization is for a very long time, people kicked God out of their society. So when you kick God out, even if you don't believe in God, God always brings law and order. There is a foundation. There's 10 commandments. Thou shalt not, right? Thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not steal. There are certain standards that we can look up to, we can turn to. And it's very interesting because Canada and United States of America, both nations were created after a persecution that was happening in Europe. So the pilgrims and the people that were Christians that were persecuted in England and France and Germany and other places where a Catholic Church was burning them on the stakes, and the Protestants were murdering Catholics. Sooner or later, people will have enough and they will look for alternatives. And they looked towards the New World. And that's why they called this land a new world, because this was supposed to be a new world without persecution, a world where a man can work hard and achieve something and be able to pass it to the next generations, a world without persecution, a world with freedom. So in 15 and 1600s, and of course we know that the Vikings came here earlier. We know that there were people living here earlier before the Native Americans. But anyway, I want to just focus on why Canada, United States of America, the way we see those nations now were created. They were created mostly by Christians that escaped persecution in Europe. They came here in Ireland, of course, and Scotland and Poland and other places, and Jewish, Russian people escaped here as well. And then there was the immigration, of course, before the Second War and after. But anyway, this nation was built by the founding fathers, and it's fascinating because it was built on Judeo-Christian values, and the foundation was the Bible. That's why Canada is called Dominion of Canada, because of the Psalm where it says that Jesus will have dominion from sea to sea. So fast forward, those people died, and about 40, 50 years, for about 40, 50 years right now, what we're seeing is indoctrination, not education, and also a very heavy attack on this foundation that our nations were built upon. In our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, so not very long, because Charter of Rights and Freedoms was replaced with the Bill of Rights, and that's our Constitution. In a Charter of Rights and Freedoms that was replaced, unfortunately, by the Trudeau's, in quote, father, because we don't know whose his father really was it Castro or was Pierre? We don't know that, but I'll leave that, on a side. So Diefenbaker brought one of the greatest prime ministers in our beautiful Canada. He came with the Bill of Rights, and Bill of Rights was a very powerful document where a man was supposed to be free. However, Pierre was a clever manipulator, a clever a socialist and communist. So he introduced the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and he included all kinds of different things that potentially could open a Pandora's box. And that's exactly what happened. But even him was afraid to kick God completely out of our society. And a preamble to our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as Pierre drafted with his people, says, whereas Canada acknowledges the supremacy of God and the rule of law. So if you don't have God, there goes your rule of law. And here is what happened in the past 40, 50 years. 10 Commandments were kicked out from our justice system. Out. Prohibited. Then prayer was kicked out from our schools. Bibles were prohibited from the public arena. As you remember, I was the first Canadian 17 years ago, or 16 years ago, I was the first Canadian to be arrested for publicly reading Bible. I received criminal charges in 2006. No amplification, in a park, just to 6 of my parishioners, and no one there. And yet I got arrested and faced a year of imprisonment for my crime of reading the Bible in public. And of course, after that, I received tickets for giving free goods and services, illegal prayers, illegal congregation, illegally feeding people, a distribution of printed material, which are Bibles and gospel tracts. So I got 340 citations from 2005 and over 100 court cases. So this has been going on for a very long time. I mean, when I talk to people and they say, oh my God, this just started 2 years. No, you have not been paying attention. Yep. They were doing this. They were preparing the way, if you will, for a very long time. And the 2 years or the 2 and few months just revealed what kind of men they really are. In other words, they put masks on us, but their masks were taken down. Yep. So Jason Kenney, Trudeau, and others like them, their masks are gone. Ford, right? Ford is a perfect example of a psychopathic maniac, pathological liar that enslaves people. And yet I don't know how he got reelected. I mean, you know, one of my revelations in life is this, that people are extremely stupid. And the older I get, the more I agree with that statement. People are just stupid. They're not learning from history, and they are eating whatever you are serving.
They have information all over the place. They have the most information ever. It's all there. It's all pretty well. You can see it. I mean, Trudeau wants to put Bill C-11 in to stop everything. But hopefully the Senate turns it down. Otherwise, I don't know what's going to happen to Canada and this channel and everybody else. But there's so much information. That's why they destroy history. They take down John A. Macdonald statues. and they take criminals and they say, well, if you have hard drugs, well, we won't charge you anymore. And look what happened to the C train in Calgary. It's overrun with hard drugs and everything. And they'll take people like you, people like me, people who just have a different opinion, who say, who are patriots, who are patriotic, and not in a bad way, in a good way. Like every history lesson has a patriot or has somebody stand up for God, and they'll label them as a white supremacist, nationalist, racist, blah, blah. It's the same. It's so boring too. It's not creative at all. And I don't want to say too much, but Pierre Trudeau is at least smart and his son is not. But he is very, he doesn't, he honestly doesn't. They played their hand. Do you think they played their hand with the truckers pretty well? Like they did the full amount of authority. Like they didn't have to go and warn people about being communists. They did it. And the Americans sure seem to notice that. Do you think that they played their hand a lot with you with your 51 days in jail? Like pulled all the stops on you?
Well, here is what I believe is happening. Tyrants they have limited cards, put it this way. They are very greedy people, and they don't want to share the power, and they think they're special. They think that they're smarter, they're special, they're the elites. You will own nothing and you will be happy, and they will own everything that they have stolen from you, and they will be extremely unhappy, I guess. So they have very limited cards, and one of the cards that they constantly are turning to is fear and terror. So what they were doing when the momentum was getting bigger, and we had 15, 20,000 people on the streets of Calgary, the Coots, Milk River had 15,000 on one day. And then, of course, we had over 1 million people that supported, or maybe more, but at least 1 million people here in Canada that supported the truck convoy. And they got scared. They desperately needed to stop this. They didn't know how to stop this legally, because legally they could not stop this. And that's just the bottom line. So what they did, they turned to UN, and you know that those police officers were not Canadians.
Yeah, they weren't Canadians. I guess people say Ukrainians or some other country, because they had no identification, and there was rumors of UN planes flying in or something, but yes, they were not.
Yes. Yeah, that's a confirmed fact. They were not Canadians. They were just dressed for the role. And you got to remember, you think, and I used to think the same way, that Trudeau is a stupid man. I think he is not stupid. I think he plays a dummy. And yet, if you look at his career, slowly he is implementing what his father could not achieve, and his another father, maybe a biological father, did achieve in Cuba. So he is moving forward to everything he admires. I don't know if you remember, publicly he said it, that he has a huge admiration with the simplicity, the dictatorship, the simple dictatorship, in China, where things can be done quickly. In other words, what he's saying to you Canadians, I want totalitarian power, and if you oppose me, I can throw you in prison or kill you, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. That's a totalitarian regime that we see in China, where people are being tortured on a regular basis, forced labor, slavery, and they have absolutely no voice. And that's exactly what he's doing. And I said to Canadians at the very beginning, I said, listen, it's just a matter of time when they're going to come for your guns and your ability to defend yourself. And look at us now, total prohibition or